Is that a Gigabyte GeForce RTX 5090? Yes. It came from Micro Center. I bought it. It's mainly for machine learning, but I heard these things have a leak. Let's take a look. "32 gigs of VRAM. This is a monstrous 4-slot card. You know, the box is wrong. It says there's 3X fans. We're gonna take it apart in a minute. There's not 3X fans, there's 4. It has a tiny LCD screen? What is this madness? Okay, I've got the Core Ultra 9 285K and a 9800X 3D. Okay, this is not the 9800X 3D system yet. I've got a test CPU in there because I've been setting up my B850i from MSI, which I did a video on separately, but we're doing gaming between these two systems with a 5090 for benchmarking. Because gaming, I mean, that's why you buy this, gaming. That's why I'm doing this video. It's like, did you buy the wrong thing when you bought the AORUS Master? Wouldn't the 2-slot Founders Edition have been better? I don't know, let's take a look in our test bed configuration, but also we'll deploy it in a real machine. But first, the unboxinating. Okay, in the paper, we receive notice of the 4th fan and how you mount the 4th fan. You can do a push-pull through the flow-through configuration on this heatsink. You got the AORUS warranty registration card. You have to register for the 4-year warranty within 30 days of purchase. Ugh. And then you've got Team-On stickers, installation guide. It comes with a graphics card holder. There's a lot of installation help and accessories here. This thing does actually come with a lot of installation accessories. When you buy one of these, you're buying it at a premium. I mean, NVIDIA has sort of trickled out Founders Edition versions of this card at about $2,000. I hope it's obvious to you, the viewer, that it's a little disingenuous that, you know, NVIDIA is selling the Founders Edition for $2,000. Meanwhile, board partners can't touch $2,000. But they hope they can upsell you with the value proposition, $1,000 worth of gear, which is a fan and a stand. I don't think I really need to talk more about that. You can use your critical thinking facilities to think through that. But at the end of the day, 32 gigs of VRAM, this much computational horsepower, and even at like $3,000, especially if you're doing machine learning stuff, it's kind of a deal. Of course, the better deal, if you are into machine learning things, is the $8,500 to $9,000 RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell, which is also a 600-watt card, but has 96 gigs of VRAM instead of a paltry 32. I mean, couldn't they have at least gone to 48? Warning, please only use the official 16-pin 12V power to 8-pin power adapter that comes with your graphics card purchase. Make sure the adapter is fully seated and clicks into place to prevent poor contact, which may cause an increase in temperature or other hazards. They were too chicken to actually print fire. Doesn't say fire. It's fine. It's fine. You want to know the solution to this? The solution to this is ASRock's Tai-Chi power supply. This is a 1650 watt power supply that's like 12 pounds in the box here. It has temperature sensors at the GPU end of the connector. It knows if the connector is overheating and it will shut down the power supply because it is literally monitoring the temperature. I covered this at Computex. Got one of these in the box. If you're worried about a melting connector, this is the solution that ends all other solutions because of the temperature sensor. This is the 4th fan, kind of like breaking the 4th wall. But this is the 4th fan that you can add to your GPU, or not, as the case may be. You get mounting hardware, the AORUS sticker, and then there's the GPU. Look at this madness. My head for scale. It's absurd. There you go. 4 slots. Really, it's a little bigger even than 4 slots. What an enormous chonker of a card. Now, obviously, this is a single flow-through design, unlike the Founders Edition, where it can flow air through the GPU here. Air will flow through there and here. This is a unified sort of traditional PCB design, so it's more like a normal GPU, which is why it's so much more enormous. Now, leaks. So there was reports on the internet that Gigabyte had a thermal material that would leak out. And if you look in the edges really carefully, you can see thermal material. It is somewhat normal for the first time cards like this are thermal cycled for there to be a little bit of a separation because the thermal interface material becomes a little bit more malleable, a little more pliant, and sometimes a non-conductive fluid can ooze out. So far that hasn't happened, but I haven't run this GPU extensively yet for the benchmarks, so we'll see about that in a minute. Part of the reason I picked up this at Micro Center is because 3 different people on the forum reached out about this GPU with that issue. And so they were like, hey, you want to borrow the GPU? It's like, nah, I'll just pick one up. So I can investigate for myself. Now, in all 3 of those, it's been the oldest one. You know, this card's been out, well, the 5090 launched like 4 months ago. People have been able to buy this card intermittently over the last 4 months. The oldest report I have of that was like 2.5, 3 months old. And their card is still running great. And the temperatures have not gotten worse. And the hotspot temperatures are not, to me, suspect. But the person that bought it was not, this is like their first, I'd got a career in computers and I'm going to spend a lot of money on my computer purchase. So I can sort of understand that their attitude has soured, but it hasn't actually manifest in any instability as yet so far, knock on wood. If that changes, pin a comment below, check out the Level 1 forums. That's why we have the forums, so we can discuss and learn and do fun stuff. The other thing that I noticed that I wasn't sure about from the reports, but is interesting, is that for the aftermarket power adapters that I've gotten so far, all of them have had NVIDIA branding on them. This one does not. I'm not going to read too much into that, but this little adapter does not have NVIDIA branding on the thing, and it is not labeled or even embossed that, yes, this is designed to support 600 watts. I think Gigabyte ought to do that at least. I mean, I'm sure it's designed for 600 watts because it was bundled with this card, but, you know, and with that ASRock power supply, I wouldn't use that connector anyway, but for our test systems here, we'll probably use this connector just for giggles. Now, the 4th fan, it has a mounting system that's designed to mount here. And so you may have clearance issues depending on what else is going on in the rest of your system, but that is literally a flow-through design because this fan is going to force air through the system, but then the fan up here is going to pick up that air and pull as well. So it'll pull some air in from the side here instead of, because there's, you know, it's push-pull configuration. Makes sense. I'm going to do the testing without the 4th fan, and then if there's enough interest, I will do some additional testing with the 4th fan. Now, it has a nice rubber gasket around it and RGB breakout pins and a 4-pin pass-through connector, so you could connect this to your motherboard. The standoff is also a little over the top. It comes with 2 versions of the standoff, so one you could use in a smaller and one in a taller tower case. So if you've got a tower case where it's like this is in the bottom and it's got to clear the power supply and everything else, that makes sense. So that's good foresight on Gigabyte's part. And then it's got a little rubber foot there, and a mount there that's designed for a thumb screw, and then these 2 screws actually physically mount into this GPU. So Gigabyte also designed this card to be able to use in OEM systems, in system builder systems, or boutique system builders, because they prefer physically mounting the card so it doesn't put a lot of stress on the motherboard. And that makes sense to me. You can mount it on both ends, and that is definitely the best way to do it. So you can get certain cases that are designed with this in mind, and so they'll have other styles of brackets that are designed for holding this GPU. You see this mostly on like the RTX Pro 6000 GPUs, like all of those GPUs are designed for that kind of mounting, but consumer GPUs are getting so unwieldy that if you just, you know, if you install this and it doesn't have extra mounting and you just jostle your computer from an inch, it's going to damage the slot. Okay, it's not that fragile, but it wouldn't take much with this much mass to destroy your PCIe 5 slot, or crack it so that it's not applying the appropriate pressure, and then you have weird flakiness that is unexplainable. Do you find the white aesthetic of this card appealing? Or what do you find appealing? Peel on out of here. How big of a power supply do you need if you're going to get a 5090? 850 is not going to cut it. At least, if you're going to get a Core Ultra 7 or a Core Ultra 9, you really need a little bit more headroom than an 850. If you're going to go for a 9800X3D, you might be able to squeak by on an 850, but really, 1,000 watts would be a better choice. 1,000, 1,200 watts, something like that, just to make sure that you have ample headroom for your power supply. Just because the entire rest of the system. Also, like surge power in terms of the amount of power required will go a little beyond what you think. I've seen Core Ultra 9 285K require upwards of 300 watts on an overclocking motherboard with really amazing cooling. This is a tower cooler. We're going to be keeping it in spec. It's going to be on the order of 200 watts most of the time, but 600 plus 250, that's all the power supply budget that I've got in this test system. Don't think it's going to cause an issue. If it does, I'll switch power supplies, but that's kind of one of the things I want to test here is like, can I trip over current protection? Even if I don't trip over current protection though, I'm telling you, spend the extra money on a better power supply or a higher wattage power supply. And the tiny little LCD screen comes to life. But will the rest of the system? Now, it's not just drivers that you need to install anymore in 2025 with GPUs like this. NVIDIA's had its own share of issues. Black screens, flickering, been a lot of driver issues with the 50 series, sure, but some of the issues were down to firmware. And Gigabyte has their own firmware updates because not everything was totally bug-free for the initial launch. So from Gigabyte.com, we're downloading the AORUS updates for this, and immediately, firmware version 1.2, begin flash, please wait for a while. Well, I've been waiting a while. I'll wait a little bit longer, but the card needs firmware updates. So if you're experiencing black screens or anything that's a little bit weird, check if you have an optional firmware update for your card. The last time this happened, I want to say this severely, was with the 10 series, the GeForce 10 series. There have been firmware updates here and there for other cards, but yeah, the 5000 series needs some updates. And that's okay, because once they're working, it's not terrible. Still updating, I guess. Unless Windows Update has screwed me by installing something in the background while the firmware update was installing. Fun times. I'm also noticing, just from a quick tour of the system, the boost clock on this, 2655. That is above the boost clock that I'm seeing from the Founders Edition version of the card that I have by more than 100 megahertz. So this thing should perform better than a Founders Edition card, but we'll see. Hey, the firmware update is finished. Let's move on to the benchmarks. I love being able to load custom animations on little LCD screens that are sprinkled throughout the system. The upload process on this one was glacial. It took a while. And even though, it's got a 5 megs file size limit, and even though I came in under that limit when I selected the crop area that I wanted to do this, it wasn't able to resize it. So the software needs a little bit more polish. You got to wait on it. But how often are you really changing these little animations? Also, there are rights holders out there that sociopathically think that I owe them $1 for using this kind of an animation in this context, which is insane and absurd. And if you watching this video and I don't take action to stop that, that is the walls that are going to close in around us with regard to using technology for fun things. Yeah. Anyway. Of course, the one true answer for the permanent installation on this card has to be something for Star Trek, right? Probably an LCARS screen or something like that. I think that'll be fine. And then you can always overlay text on top of your GIF that has the stats about the card, whatever stats you want. VRAM usage, temperature, etc., etc. Understand that those values come from a program running on the host system, though. The GPU doesn't self-report. You don't just tell the GPU, hey, run these numbers on the LCD screen. A program running in Windows has to report that to the GPU and display it. That happens outside of regular GPU utilization. But still, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun toy. Now, one aspect of this card is to do with power delivery and the melting connector and all that kind of thing. And like I say, you can use the ASRock power supply to have a temperature sensor on the connector. But I've created a bad situation here. I've actually left the power delivery pins unplugged from one of our 3 connectors. Now, normally, in past generations, without getting too far in the weeds, when 3 of these are connected, the connector is supposed to be able to sense that one of the connectors is missing, and that you can run the card at 450 watts. This card was still running at 550 watts plus, with only the 3 connectors connected. This is a sense pin, this is just grounds, and so I am cheating a little bit here, but if you didn't have the connectors in good on this side, but you had the sense pins in good, then this could also lead to connector heating. This is one of the failure modes that I've suspected for a long time. This card does not detect that. It does have an LED on the back side of the power connector, but it doesn't seem to know that 6 of our pins here, or 3 of our power delivery pins, are unconnected. The card is operating normally. As far as I know, the only 5090 that does any kind of sense like this is the ASUS Astral. Even the Founders Edition card is kind of set up in a way that when you have a connector failure, it will not improve things, it will not help things. But this card doesn't throw a warning or give you any kind of indication or anything like that one of the power connectors is missing. And no 5090 card that I know of, other than the Astral, is capable of doing that because of the design recommendations from NVIDIA. So a lot of those words to just say, be extra careful connecting your power. Now, if you do get the ASRock power supply with the temperature sensor, you won't use this little white breakout cable. You will be using the native cable. The cable will just go straight into the GPU, and it has a temperature sensor in it to let you know if there's anything weird going on with the connector. So even if you create a situation where not all of the power delivery pins are making it from the power supply, even the ASRock power supply, to the GPU, just by virtue of the power supply monitoring the temperature of the connector, you will know before the connector melts that there was a problem. Maybe your cable is bent too tight, or it's too tight of an angle, or something isn't making a good connection, or whatever. Temperature sensor in the cable is pretty much the most foolproof solution that I've seen so far. Other than that, performance for this thing is using about 50 to 60 watts more than our Founders Edition card, and it's a little bit faster than our Founders Edition card. It's not dramatically faster, but it is faster. And the LCD aesthetic and all of the other features of this card, it makes a lot of sense. I sort of get it. I sort of understand why people might go for this. Never mind the chaos on my desk. The benchmark results came in while I was in the middle of something else, and I didn't want to clear the desk. This is for another video. Shadow of the Tomb Raider Ultra with no ray tracing. The performance is basically identical, even for our Blackwell Pro versus the other cards, because, well, this game is just ancient. But still, it is nice to see almost 400 FPS at 1080p, and functionally no difference between 1080p and 1440p because there are bottlenecks elsewhere in the game engine. 253 FPS at 4K is also nothing to sneeze at. Can the AORUS Master match the Pro 6000 Blackwell with 96 gigs of VRAM? And the answer is no. At least not on Ultra Ray Tracing. Now remember, we've got more ROPs on the Blackwell, so it's kind of cheating. But it does pull ahead of the 5090 Founders Edition by about 4 FPS. At 4K, is anybody playing Alan Wake 2 at 4K, at least with these graphical fidelity settings? Clear Obscure is something we've been streaming a lot lately, Ultra, but with no ray tracing. And the performance here is a fair bit ahead of the 5090 Founders Edition, even all the way up to 4K. And at 4K, it's pulling ahead of our Pro 6000 Blackwell. Now remember, on the Blackwell Pro 6000, it's got 96 gigs of VRAM, which takes some power away from the cores. So even though it's got more cores, you get results like this sometimes. Cyberpunk 2077. Yeah, the AORUS Master's coming in pretty nice. The ice is nice. 250 FPS at 1080p, but an entirely playable 118 FPS at 4K. I'll take it. With Ultra Ray Tracing at 4K, we're still able to maintain 60 FPS. It's basically identical performance for the 5090 Founders Edition. Dragon Age the Veilguard. The AORUS Master's slightly behind the 5090 Founders Edition, but this is probably within margin of error for this game, given what you have to go through in order to do the benchmarking. At 4K, it's still quite a playable 124 FPS. With Ultra Ray Tracing, 4K is still playable at 94 FPS, and this is a pretty good showing here. Again, there's some variability that's probably down to the game, but overall, it's a pretty good showing. The Deus Ex Mankind Divided results are a little strange, especially at 1440p. The 5090 Founders Edition somehow pulling out 303 FPS. This was an anomaly, but it was repeatable, and I'm not sure what is going on with this. Fortunately, at 4K, basically everything normalized. This isn't the first time I've seen behavior like this from this particular game, so I'm just going to chalk this up to variability. Hogwarts Legacy on Ultra Ray Tracing. The Founders Edition and the AORUS Master Ice are neck and neck. And then at 4K, the AORUS Master Ice pulls out a win. Monster Hunter Wilds on Ultra with no ray tracing. The AORUS Master Ice is on top for pretty much everything here. Okay, the Blackwell's a little faster at 4K, but we don't count that. Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered Ultra with no ray tracing. This is another one of those games where the AORUS ICE pulls ahead. The clock speeds are a little higher. It is pretty consistent and pretty repeatable, even for the same driver versions. Now, Oblivion Remastered with ray tracing, oh, it looks like the 5090 Founders Edition is doing terrible. If you tested it last week, yeah, it was doing terrible. You tested it this week, it's doing a lot better. The Master ICE pulled a little ahead. It's not really the difference between 43 FPS average and 60 FPS average. That was down to driver issues. So the 3D Mark results here are about how you'd expect. The only anomaly here is Port Royal. Why is Port Royal so much faster with the AORUS Master versus the 5090 Founders Edition? And that has to do with versions. This is a slightly older version of the Port Royal benchmark and slightly older NVIDIA drivers from launch day. So apparently there was a bug, and the bug is fixed. And Port Royal is not that much faster on the AORUS Master ICE 32 gig, but the other numbers line up about how you would expect. Our Geekbench scores here, Vulkan and OpenCL, about where you'd expect. Our Vulkan score is a little slow for the 5090 Founders Edition 32 gig, but again, this was due to an NVIDIA driver update. Once the NVIDIA driver was updated, the 5090 and the 5090 Founders Edition, the 5090 ICE and the 5090 Founders Edition, performance was more in line. For AI and text generation, the performance between the Founders Edition and the AORUS Master ICE is basically identical, but the ICE does pull slightly ahead in most scenarios. And that makes sense because we routinely see it in power excursions at like 605 watts. It's routinely using 30 to 50 more watts of electricity than our Founders Edition card. Our Founders Edition 5090 is regularly around 550 watts anyway. So this thing basically staying at 600 watts all the time is why it's so fast. The Callisto protocol on Ultra with ray tracing, look at that. That is fantastic. 265 FPS at 4K. I'm also sorry to report that in most scenarios, Fan 4 doesn't really make a lot of a difference. You might remember our 9950X 3D build in the Fractal Meshify 3. This one is the only build with the side on and everything all closed up where the fourth fan makes a little bit of a difference. It improves the temperature. The temperature here, this heatsink, is second to none, and it is very, very good. Now the reports of out-greasing, yes, I can report that you might see a little bit of grease on the side, and it might look like it's liquid. But it's very thick and viscous, and it's not anything to worry about, and the temperatures on this platform were completely fine. So I haven't seen anything unsettling, and non-conductive thermal paste, more is more, less is not more. More is fine. The cooling solution on this, in other words, is incredibly effective, so I'm not going to knock it. In fact, the VRMs and everything else, like the VRMs are alarmingly hot on the Founders Edition of the 5090. Like I worry because I had a 4090 that died, and it died because the back of it was absurdly hot, and the replacement 4090 that I got after some teeth gnashing was much cooler on the backside for whatever reason. Maybe design change, I don't know, but that has always weirded me out since the 4090. So the 5090 Founders Edition that I have running as hot as it does is alarming. When we're talking about 600 watts, mainly in the VRM area, not so much like they did a good job cooling the GPU part of it, but the VRM part of it I'm really worried about. This whole thing, all of the temperature sensors were reported just, using the thermal camera looking into it. This is superior, but I would hope so since it's 4 slots instead of 2. So I don't see anything untoward with the grease. I don't see anything untoward with anything else. The fourth fan is mostly not needed. You can maybe talk me into using it in a build like this where I've got sort of the scoop and maybe having the extra pull to, get the air out the back in a tower cooler build like this. Maybe it would make sense. It did improve the temperatures a little bit, but mostly, in our open air bench and the other stuff, not so much. Love the LCD, love the aesthetic, like everything else about this card. Stay tuned. This is going to be in the lab for a while, so if it dies in 6 months, you'll hear about it. Pinned comment below, hang out in the forums. This is level 1. If you want to have me run something or test something with this card, definitely let me know. 32 gigs of VRAM, large language models and everything like that. Run like a dream, being able to run a 30 billion parameter model with some significant context fitting in VRAM. That's always very, very nice. And Wendell, this is level 1. I'm signing out. You can find me in the level 1 forums.